Hey folks, AJ here. I was sent a sealed list as a nice little puzzle from a friend of mine. So this is a pool that they have, and we're going to try and build. So I'll run through a fairly typical process I use for sealed is just to look at the rarity first and see if anything jumps out. Usually the higher power cards are in the rare end. So far I've played a draft and 2 sealed decks just using tokens from a bundle I bought on Arena. It's been going okay, sort of treading water. Don't really have any concrete impressions or validations of what I thought going into the set blind, but yeah, in another couple of rounds, I'll get something a little more concrete. Um, so in looking at the rares, like I think the Eagles is possibly among the best cards. Bard, King of Dale, I think is good if it's on the battlefield, but it is quite expensive. And if you're getting to 6 mana and then drawing extra cards, you're probably already in an okay spot. But I did play against it once, and I was more impressed by it than I thought I would be. I think Through the Forest Gate is a dud. Gigantic Big Bear is indeed gigantic and quite difficult to interact with. You're gonna lose 2 to 3 creatures at least. God forbid they have some sort of trick or way to pump it even more. Not sure about the Notary Hobbits yet. It's a ton of mana, and 3/1/1s for 5 isn't the worst deal. What you're going to do with all that colorless mana, I'm not sure. And the Master of Late 10 is very much, it's kind of by default a 3/1. I played against it once, and it was very difficult for the graveyards not to be full. Indeed, it very quickly came down to trying to identify if decking was a win condition. Okay, for the uncommons, we've got some Sylvan Revelers, so they're pretty good if we happen to be green, blue specifically. Nothing particularly exciting from the green uncommons of Old Fat Spider, Gallant Elven King's Butler, or Bjorn's Hospitality. Red, we've got triple Misty Mountain Rider. That's the 4/4 for 5 that you get to amass 2 when you attack. I've had 2 of these in play at once with like a 2/2 amass token, and then suddenly you're going, okay, I attack you for 6. And you're adding 4 power and toughness to the board every turn. That doesn't take long to win. Bothersome Noisemaker as well. That's apparently been among the most winningest cards. That's the red one, Goblin Bard 2/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature, you amass goblins 1. Some of the counter spells in blue, Sound the Trumpets and Thranduil's Decree, and then in white we've got 2 Lake Town Toymakers and an Iron Hills Blacksmith. That's the double strike 1/1. Again, just not really looking at the actual cards, but just the volume of red. There's 5 red uncommons, and they're all playable to good. We've also got the Great Goblin at rare. That's 3/2 for Rakdos, and colorless. Whenever one or more counters are put on a goblin, orc, or army, the Great Goblin deals 2 damage to an opponent, and whenever a goblin, orc, or army dies, you get to exile a card and play it until the end of your next turn. So that's a pretty good effect. I'm pretty convinced that like the consensus seems to be that black red is the best deck, and I am seeing like a decent amount of black red in the uncommon and rare slot. So my first pass, given just by looking at the cards in these 2 columns, we've got 2 rares and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 potential uncommons for that deck. So if the rare cards are better, let's try and play the better cards. So we'll filter by black red. And first I'll start out with the rares and mythics and uncommons. So we'll put in 3 Misty Mountain Raider. Glow in the Mighty might make it, like, I think when Easy Pickings Adventure, that's red and 2 for sorcery that does 1 damage to each creature an opponent controls. The games you cast that in are going to be pretty tremendous for you. And the 4/3 body can be okay. I think in any deck, even an aggressive one, you might end up playing Thrower's Map just as a 2-cost. Like originally, I had like the set seemed to be about having a significant board presence. That every card you cast, you're trying to affect the board state in somewhat by adding power and toughness to your side or removing it from your opponents. But seeing this as something that helps smooth your draw, and as one of the content podcasts I listen to, they described it as it's a 2-mana land cycler that leaves behind a rummage effect. That's pretty fantastic. And I've spoken before about the whole choke point in Magic being hitting your land drops. So if this can help us hit our land drops and continue to make game actions and make decisions, then that seems like a good thing. Okay, so we'll look now at just the commons in this color and the artifacts, I guess. Well, we'll leave the artifacts for the moment. So Nori, Teller of Tales, 2/2 attacking first striker for Boris, that's fine. Owen the Brave, 1 red for 1/3. Gets +1/+0 if you're storied and has the rummage effect. Also fine. Smoke's Fury is a playable combat trick. We've got Snickety Voice Goblins, that's the Ravenous Rat, and 4 frontline sentry or front porch sentries, 2/2 that dies to give an opponent creature -1/-1 at the end of turn. I think they're okay. Double Goblin Opportunist is very appealing. Again, something I mentioned about before, if you can build a deck where you have this attrition battle going on with your cheaper creatures and removal interacting with your opponent's creatures, and then you make up your card advantage with things like the Opportunist, or in this case, the Thrower's Map, or maybe even the Great Goblin. Rage into the Valley operates in the same similar axis in drawing cards. And we've got the Cruel Bent Blade, which is a similar. It's 3 mana to kill an opponent, to make an opponent sacrifice a creature. I originally thought there'd be too many small tokens, like 1/1 armies floating around, or recruit tokens, but this has killed a relevant creature every time, and the equip cost is quite cheap for the effect it gives. So I quite like that. We've got some amass stuff going on, so I'm going to add in the Tidings of War, especially as a way to quickly begin an army to start amassing onto, whether it's from the Misty Mountain Raider, Rage into the Valley. I think we've got another one somewhere. Oh yeah, the Bothersome Noisemaker. Yeah, the Noisemaker plus Tidings just makes a 2/2 for a single mana, which is pretty great. I think having the Duskwatch Hunter is fine. Like, it again fits that role of it trades, leaves behind a little bit of something, just need another creature in play to put a counter on. The removal here is pretty scant, so I think I might end up adding Smog and maybe even Smog's Fury as a combat trick. Probably at least once front port sentries. And this is something I've noticed across the various colors and combinations in building decks. There does seem to be a case that, given it's a 2-color set, there's 5 2-color combinations. A lot of the time it's just identifying the one that's either the deepest or the one that offers a sufficient quantity of playables to get to that 23, critical 23 spell mark. And luckily we're just about there with red black. It's not that I'm super excited about everything. I'm really concerned about no wheel removal. So we have to kind of use our creatures to trade off against the opponents, which means some, like, the opponent resolving a Dale or a Big Bear. Well, this isn't a great example because the gigantic Big Bear has hexproof. But just some other large creature, we don't really have a way to get it off the board. But at least for first pass, I would say a black-red deck is sufficient. We have 0 lands, which is weird and interesting. Looking at the artifacts, none of these really help fill out or shore up any of the issues we have. I think the last card I would add would probably be the Long-Bodied Grey Dog, as the treasure can help us accelerate into the Misty Mountain Raider. So I will click publish on this and have that as a first pass. And then I'm going to clear the deck and have a look at some of the other combinations. Specifically, I'm going to look at instant sorceries and enchantments that are not in black and red, just to see where, if anywhere, where the interaction lies. So we've got 3 Magnificent End in white. We've also got a copy of The Eagles Are Coming, which is a powerful rare. It may be the case that, like in, let's say, Strixhaven, the rule was try and build 5-color, stretching your mana base into as many directions as you can and playing every powerful card you have, and then on the other end playing as aggressive a black-white deck as you could, without trying to be somewhere in the middle, if possible, for sealed. I'm wondering if this ends up being a similar way. At least with the black-red deck, we've got this kind of baseline or default to say, well, this is what an aggressive deck looks like from our pool. But I'm kind of interested in looking at white. Blue has 2 uneasy partings, but if we just focus on everything in blue, where do we end up? So I'm just clicking through. We've got Bilbo Lockwearer, it's the 1/1 looter Bilbo. A couple of Elven King Harper as a 2/2 that's sort of, we'd play it if we had to. Lakeshore Apothecary. Bard as the Bard King of Dale as the payoff. That's the 4 blue white 3/5 reach vigilance, and then it doubles card drawer tokens. Let's remove the blue and filter for the text of recruit. And we have 3 cards that say recruit. We have Sound the Trumpets, that's the counterspell, and if it's mana value 2 or less, you recruit. We have Longlake Nuisance, 3/1 flyer for 4, that when it enters you recruit, and then the Patient Instructor, which is the 2/2, when it enters you recruit for 2 and a Azorius hybrid. So the answer is there's really not very much in the line of recruiting there. But the white itself did seem okay. Like, even though I don't think I was quite low on the Patient Instructor, but I've come up a little bit in that it has the capacity to trade off in getting you some adjustment in your hand, so some slight smoothing of draws. The main pull for white, I think, is the fact that you've got the Magnificent End and the Eagles Are Coming. So we'll add in Nori, Teller of Tales, Iron Hills Blacksmith, Dwarven Provisioner, Velvet Wing Butterflies, Ori, Keeper of Songs, just as a kind of a curve filler 3-drop. And then I'll take a look at green. I didn't really examine green too heavily. So we do have 3 Attercop in green. But I think even though a green-blue deck, or a green-white deck would be perhaps functional or serviceable, it isn't supported, so as green-white rather, it isn't one of the 5 supported color combinations, so I might stray away from it. It really is white. If we're saying that the blue isn't so deep, like we're not really leveraging the King of Dale. We've got Plunder the Troll Shows, and we've got the Thror's Map as ways to draw extra cards, but besides that, and the payoff is really only Bard. Uneasy Partings, we've got 2 copies of those. They're good to bounce tokens, but I think I'm not seeing a sufficient power level sort of threshold that's crossed in blue for blue-white. I will build it out just to see, so we can have a look at how it might end up. And even if I just click on sort of everything I'd be interested in playing in blue-white, yeah, I suppose we are kind of getting there. So we're up to 23 cards with 13 creatures, which isn't great when one of our better cards relies on us having actual creatures and not tokens in play, and the Eagles Are Coming. So the blue-white deck, just as a to list it out, on 2-drop creatures, we've got 6 in Dwarven Provisioners, Ironhill's Blacksmith, Bella Luckweaver, Elven King's Harper, Lakeshore Apothecary, Nori Teller of Tales, Longbeard, Great Dog, Patient Instructor, Mirkwood, Meditator, Velvet Wing Butterflies, and Ori Keeper of Secrets on 3, 1/4 in the Lakeshore Nuisance, and 1/6 in Bard King of Dale. I'm not entirely sold on this, but I think the black-red deck is probably just a bit better. Okay. Just checking green because we've got the 2 retrievers, the grey hobbits. We've got some big chonkers with Old Fat Spider and Gigantic Bear. 3 ordinary bears just allows us, and maybe a Gallon. Like, that's on turn 4. This deck is making a large threat. And then we'll fill out the curve. We've got for 3 the Duskwatch Hunter, I think, and then 2 Wargling. It's going to trigger its ferocious effect, I guess, with all of the bears. And giving trample to the team is okay. I guess Warg Tactics, that's the destroy a creature with flying or put a counter and a creature gains trample and hexproof on end of turn. That's something that'll have a bit more of a use case in sealed than in draft. And then at least in best of 1, we've got a Quarrel, and then 3 Attercop, which I quite liked in their ability to trade off and kind of against kind of anything. Similar enough to the black-red deck, we've got that kind of strategy, just looking at the green base, including the 2 Sylvan Reveler, that it's pointing in the direction that we might be able to, like, both be an aggressive deck where we're playing out a bunch of creatures and attacking. All of our 2-drops are difficult to interact with. Well, the 3 Attercops, I mean, are difficult to interact with. Duskwatch Hunter is a 3 that gives Ferocious on its own. And then 4 of our 4-drops are 4/4 or 4/5. So that's just a consistent adding lots of power to the board. If we look at the artifacts, I think we would play Thrower's Map and the Long-Bodied Grey Dog, again, for curve filling and to help us accelerate. We really don't want to miss our 4th land drop with this deck if we did choose to play it, and I guess that would mean the Old Thrush can come in. Then, if we look at blue, given that the Sylvan Reveler 2 blue-green for the 3/2 elf that lets you draw and discard when you cast it, and it puts a land, if you discard a land, puts that into play, and then you can rebuy it later from your graveyard. Yeah, given the sort of signpost uncommon for this color combination, we want to try and fill it out with the blue. Uneasy Partings, that's the Riptide effect. Plunder the Troll Shows. Apothecary works with the Reveler. We've got Bilbo Luckwearer, another 4-drop in the flyer. Given we've got Old Thrush, Thrower's Map, and the Long-Bodied Grey Dog, we can probably afford to splash Bard. The Provisioner comes in. If we're splashing Bard, we might think, well, if we've got white mana anyway, we could play at least a couple of Magnificent End and the Eagles Are Coming. I think I'm starting to like this idea more so than the black-red or the blue-white. I think there's enough depth here in Bant that we can, like, rather than trying to struggle to get up to the last 22nd, 23rd card and putting in something that we might consider a bit weaker, this is offering a pool of 30, and there's still maybe more additions, and all of these 30 cards are things that I think are justifiable as far as the choice to play them is concerned. And there's even some in the sideboard, like Thranduil's Decree, although I think that's very matchup dependent. Maybe in sealed, Sound of Trumpets is worthwhile, but I still don't really have an impression of like is the default in sealed being like Boros or Rakdos, and that having a 3 mana reactive card like that is a bit too risky. I will publish this one as well, and I'll share the links in the comments, and I'd be interested to see if somebody else builds this differently. I do have to go now, but I think that's the 2 parts where I'd start, and I'm not sure exactly how I'd trim down the spells from the Bant deck, but it's a nice problem to have. All right, thanks. Catch you again.